What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. I'm joined once again by Jimmy Watkins, the man who wears several hats, columnist, cleveland.com. Jimmy, how was your weekend? I know you were busy dealing with everything Browns and all of those things. How was it?
It's football, man. We're back. Went to Texas, Michigan on Saturday. Browns, Cowboys on Sunday. Ironically, two games that looked pretty similar, unfortunately, for a lot of our listeners here. But, yeah, on the road, drinking a ton of coffee, late nights writing. We are back in the swing of things. How you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm not living as lavish as you, but I'm trying to figure out what was the better game to watch this past weekend, Michigan, Texas, or Browns, Cowboys? Because we know both games kind of ended up in a blowout, but which one did you enjoy being at more?
Man, that's tough. I mean, I will spare Browns fans my Deshaun Watson, Davis Warren comparisons, though you can make them. You can make them. I guess it's just I generally believe that there is a higher floor and a higher, like, I think that you're getting a better product when you're watching the NFL. Although, like, it is interesting to watch a lot of these teams come out of the preseason with this trend of not playing a bunch of guys and resting people during camp, and seeing, like, I saw today there's like 33 touchdown passes total yesterday, which is, for the last 5 years. Last year was 37, but the last 3-4 years before that would be like 55, 60-ish. So that's interesting. I think there's just a lot of rust on everyone's wagon right now. So there were good football games this weekend. I just wasn't in attendance for either of them.
That's for sure. I mean, it's also the weather's changing on us, Jimmy. I know summer is coming to an end, but it was getting chilly. I'm over here in a sweatshirt because it's cold. Like, I was enjoying the 90-degree, 85-degree weather days that we were having in Cleveland, Ohio, that I was told by many it's short-lived, and I didn't believe them. So it brings me back to my days at OU. When the leaves would change, and immediately it would be going from summertime to where's your jacket at?
So the Southern Ohio. Okay, here's the thing: Southern Ohio winters not real. Like, that's it. Really is, like, it's crazy to think that it actually makes a difference. But even in, like, Columbus, they don't get as much snow. In Athens, you're still getting like some 40, 50-degree temperature days peeking through. But yeah, I was walking. So Michigan, this is too much information about how media works sometimes, but Michigan makes media members pay $80 to park at their stadium. So I was like, no chance I'm doing that. So I just found like a street parking spot like a mile away from the stadium. So I had to stroll a bit on my way to that game. And it was a little nippier than I was prepared for. I was sniffling in the Browns press box yesterday.
Man. But, I mean, we're talking a little bit about summer, and the Cavs have had themselves a summer, right, Jimmy? Because we talk about the guys that they didn't sign. We talk about the things that they didn't do this offseason that a lot of fans were looking forward to. Maybe some changes, but the things that they did do, right? And most recently, they added a new head coach. They added a new coaching staff with a lot of new faces on it. And a lot of different roles for some guys that were already on the staff. And then you get into some of the players that are on new deals, new contracts, and none other than Cleveland faithful's favorite, Donovan Mitchell. And Donovan was, in fact, a part of the Cleveland Browns experience once again this past weekend, right? He was seen at municipal lot tailgate, just doing everything that you would expect from a regular Clevelander, right? He went keg bowling, and he was playing cornhole, Jimmy. I don't know if it gets any more Cleveland than that.
I mean, first of all, Ethan, don't be a cop. It's called the Muni Lot. Donovan will tell you that. Donovan will tell you that now that he has been indoctrinated into Cleveland football culture. And I actually thought it was interesting. We might already be reading too much into this, but like when I saw that video, um, I assumed that Donovan would be like the guitar smashing guys. For those who don't know, the Browns before every game invite like someone with like a Cleveland tie or a Browns tie to come in and like smash a guitar with the other team's logo on it right before the game. It's kind of fun. Like, JR's done it shirtless during the middle of winter for a Ravens game. Um, Machine Gun Kelly came out playing one that I thought he was going to do it yesterday. Donovan did it once last year as well. So I just assumed like, oh, he's going to be the guitar smash guy today. But no, he's just hanging out there vibing. I love that. I love that for him. And I think there could be like a small sliver in there about like, he might like Cleveland a little bit more than we originally thought. Like I still think that part of the reason that Donovan signed an extension here this summer is because he looked around and was like, where the heck else am I going to go? Like the next thing that we've been talking about for a while, it's clearly Jalen Brunson's team, him and Donovan. I don't know if that, not that they can't coexist, but it's like a similar dynamic with Darius and Don, where you got two undersized guards that are taking up the majority of your cap space. I don't know, the Brooklyn Nets, it's just kind of like a blank canvas. Donovan would need someone to go with him. The Lakers, that was floated out there a little bit for, a hot second during the season. But like, are you really trying to hitch your wagon to the last however many years left we have of LeBron? It's a handful. It's a small handful. And, 30-year-old Anthony Davis, who was fantastic during the Olympics, as an aside, God, the way that guy offensive rebounds is like freaking inspiring to me, given how like the status of him as a player, man, like star players who work the way he does. And I personally believe he's the best defensive player on the planet right now. I just think that the Lakers environment around him doesn't necessarily give him the stage or like the general team defense numbers that you would want to see from that kind of guy. Anyways, like Donovan was out of options. You know what I mean? I think that's part of the reason why he signed an extension here. But these little glimmers like this are encouraging for the long haul too. I still think whether Donovan Mitchell goes keg bowling, 8 to 9 weeks a season, like if he's at every Muni lot for the next 3 years that he's locked in here, the Cavs still need to make do on their part of the bargain, right? Like they need to not just make the Eastern Conference Finals, but be competitive in the Eastern Conference Finals. Ideally, get to the finals, win a championship to make Donovan stay. But these are, if you choose to look at them this way, if you choose to read into the Donovan keg bowling videos, for no other reason, just watch them because they're fun. And you get to see a dude who in so many ways is not like you and I behave exactly like you and I would in the same situation. But if you want to look a little further into that, give yourself a dose of optimism that, hey, Donovan Mitchell is embracing the city.
Well, Jimmy, we have to be like those people that read into it because that's what we do. And for me, it's more so like how opposite it is from what the national media or whatever was saying when Donovan first signed here. Because we already talked about it at length this offseason, right? Like, Cleveland isn't supposed to be a destination that guys want to go to, right? And that's why signing Donovan to an extension was so big for this city because not only did he come here, but he said, I want to stay. And potentially, Jimmy, he could accrue 10 years of NBA service and then get a super max deal, depending on how he plays, when his contract gets to a player option over the next 3 years. And then he could end up being a Cleveland lifer. Like, that is the reality of the situation for the Cavs right now. Depending on how they play, obviously, as you mentioned, now we said on the last couple of podcasts, is that if the Cavs can make it to the Eastern Conference Finals or NBA Finals once, maybe twice over the next 3 seasons, that gives them a good chance. But how realistic are those chances, right, for them to be able to do that against a much stronger Eastern Conference than what it was? But the other thing, I mean, Donovan has just been having a fun summer, Jimmy. And this might have been not the icing on the cake, but for the Browns fans and Clevelanders, this was definitely one of the highlights because you got to see Myles Garrett and Donovan interacting. Donovan kind of just taking a video of Myles Garrett hyping up the Cleveland crowd. It looked like you said, he was just a regular person in kind of our shoes, taking videos and taking in the atmosphere of the entire Cleveland faithful.
Yeah, the dude's had a great summer. I also I don't want to get too far afield here and talk about Donovan signing the Supermax after the 10 years of service, because there is actually a universe where the Cavs don't want to give that to him. That is a subject for a much later podcast at a much later date. Let's try to put one foot in front of the other right now and let Donovan enjoy what's left of his offseason before we start doing that. But yeah, man, it's good. It's good to let Donovan be among the people too. That's another, I think, kind of important thing that happened yesterday. Let him. I mean, you get all these, you get all the dopamine hits from people replying to you in your Twitter mentions, commenting on your Instagram, telling Donovan how good he is at basketball, how much get signing autographs with kids, whatever, at games. But you get out in the real world, get boots on the ground, get another little taste of how passionate the Cleveland fan base is. If you've ever been to a Muni Lot tailgate, that it's a different energy than that Cavs games. Even when the building's rocking in the playoffs, there's a different love for the Browns. It's good for Donovan to take that in, watch what Myles is. Myles is like Myles Garrett's the face of Cleveland sports right now. Basically, he probably has the highest approval rating of any athlete in our city right now. It's good for Donovan to see what that looks like. Maybe project himself onto that a little bit into the future if he can get the Cavs where he wants them to go. Again, we're reading way too much into this guy just pulling up and rolling a keg at some pins yesterday. It's mostly just fun, and it's a cool thing that he went out there and did it. But you can always find if you podcast hard enough, you can always find a take in there somewhere. And we're working hard today.
Jimmy, when the summer gets late and there's not a whole lot to talk about, you got to find everything that you can do, especially when usually this is a 5-day-a-week podcast. Right now, without Chris, we're doing 2 days a week, and it still feels like it's kind of hard to come over topics. But when we talk about Donovan Mitchell having a great summer, right? He signed a contract extension with Cleveland. First and foremost, that's a big thing money-wise. You get your papers filled. But even before that happened, right, he was out living his best life. He was training, getting back from the knee injury that he suffered. He was getting back into the weight room. He was attending parties, right? He was at the white party in L.A. that was hosted by Michael Rubin. He released his next shoe, Donovan Don 6, I believe it is. I think it's called the Spider Bite. And then last night, after the Cavs game or after the Browns game, it was seen that a lot of the Cleveland Cavaliers players were out and about, hanging out with themselves amongst each other, but also other celebrities around the world, right? Machine Gun Kelly was in some of the pictures on Donovan's story. Some of the Dallas Cowboys were there. Obviously, some of the Browns might have been reflecting on the loss a little bit harder than Dallas was. So that might be why there was more pictures with them than the Cleveland Browns players. But it just feels like it's been a summer that you would want to see from a guy who's happy where he is, who's been able to enjoy the life of an NBA star, but also like it's time for them to start coming together, right? Isaac Okoro was in those pictures, hanging out with the team and the guys from the NBA, but also understanding how much that means because Jared Allen was at the party, Jimmy. I'm over here trying to figure out. I was like, Jared Allen much less goes on social media, much less out the house away from his computer that he built himself. So he was there hanging out with the guys, Karis LeVert, and others like Sam Merrill, I believe, was there too. So getting the guys out and about, being able to build more camaraderie. We know that this team plays well when they have that kind of thing, those joy elements of the game, but also just realizing that every time there's a chance for this team to grow together, that's a great opportunity, right? And I feel like even though we might be reading more into it, I might be reading more into it than necessary. I think it's just something that needs to be taken note of, especially going into this next season where we know it to be pivotal. And Isaac Okoro just hanging around the guys, even though he hasn't signed his qualifying offer, should be a little bit telling.
Yeah, once again, we're podding pretty hard right now. But I'll say this. Here's what I'll say. When you mention that signing Donovan is a huge win for Cleveland because that's not the kind of guy that typically chooses the city, right? It can also he has the power right now to raise the profile of the guys around him in a way that could show future generations or future free agents that are like, hey man, maybe this big market stuff. Maybe I don't need to go to New York. Maybe I don't need to go to Miami to, I don't know. What do you care about? Get your Instagram followers up, like get invited to the white party. I mean, I haven't seen Evan Mobley, Darius Garland, ETA walking around next to clinking glasses with Jay-Z or anything yet. But like that's Donovan can be your gateway into that for some of those guys, and then maybe into the future. Okay, again, I don't want to turn this into like wine and gold, Bravo E News or whatever. But like, think back to when LeBron was here. I don't know necessarily know the timeline of events here, but I'll ask the question, and maybe this is for, I know if you get deep into these Cavs podcasts, not necessarily for the girlfriend, but if there's a girlfriend in your life, a woman in your life, or someone else who's interested in these kind of things, would Tristan Thompson end up with a Kardashian if LeBron wasn't his teammate? Would Iman Shumpert end up with Tiana Taylor, the R&B singer, if LeBron wasn't his teammate? Would these guys even be on a celebrity radar if LeBron wasn't on his teammate? Donovan's not LeBron in many different ways. He doesn't have the celebrity profile. He's not going to, no disrespect, he's not going to have the same kind of basketball legacy that LeBron has. But that's the kind of thing we're talking about. Donovan getting the guys together, even around town. Like how I'm just asking. Myles Garrett is a part owner of the Cavs. That helps. But like, are people like Jared Allen, Isaac Okoro, other names that we're talking about here, getting these invites to these kind of parties if Donovan isn't here to sort of be, a connector and a guy that genuinely, like, any of the athletes in town want to know, because playing basketball is cool, like especially the way Donovan does it. Again, we're potting so hard right now, but I think there's something in there.
Man, Jimmy, that's the point of podcast, man. We gotta get into the fun stuff, right? It's supposed to be fun. This isn't supposed to be news all the time. Even though there is news, right? We talked about Tristan Thompson, who was at the party, in the Instagram stories, all those things. They has a kid with a Kardashian, whatever aspect you want to look at Tristan's life. He also adds another year in the NBA of service to his contract when he added a 1-year deal with the Cavs recently, which was made official today. And I just think it's really important to talk about how Tristan has impacted this team, even though he doesn't play all that much, right? He is the backup center, allegedly, even though the backup center for the team that's currently constructed is actually Evan Mobley, right? Because Evan and Jarrett split the minutes at center, and then Tristan comes in whenever they need a breather or whatever it may be. It's never like, oh, well, we're in a certain situation, we want to put Tristan in the game to start over Jared Allen or Evan Mobley. That's never the case. It's not going to be the case. I know Tristan Thompson also, like I said, been watching social media all summer. Tristan Thompson has allegedly been doing 2-a-days all summer, trying to get in shape, trying to stay in shape before he signed a contract. And I think that's like, it's good because you never want somebody that's going to be on the bench that's going to be a liability when it comes to getting up and down the floor or anything like that. But I feel like also you can't be a loudmouth on the bench if you can't contribute at all. right? And we know that Tristan is an extension of the bench more so at this point in his career than he may be a player on this team, right? And I think he's the glue that's going to connect the team between the coaching staff, which is now Kenny Atkinson and the new staff and all those things. But I think it's also partially going to be Jared Allen and Karis LeVert, right? Because they have prior connections with Kenny Atkinson from playing under him in Brooklyn and things like that. So I just think it's going to be interesting. These guys have like great relationships with each other. That is why this team has worked, even though like there feels like there are holes missing in this team. This is one of the more connected teams around the NBA. Max Strus has said it. Donovan has said it. Tristan has said it. Like, this is a team that they like each other. They can play with each other. And they get along off the court together, which isn't always the case. And I feel like it can go over people's heads quite often, Jimmy. What do you think about the re-signing of Tristan Thompson?
I like the idea of Tristan Thompson as a kick in the ass every now and again. I like the way Tristan Thompson talked about. He speaks bluntly sometimes. Talking about getting Evan Mobley and Jared Allen ready for the playoffs. Talking about, showing them in practice. You said that the Cavs will go to Tristan Thompson when one of those guys needs a breather. They might go to him in a game when somebody needs an elbow on the other team as well. And in practice, I think Tristan has been in the league long enough to know how to toe the line between practicing with a physicality that will give Evan and Jared a sense of what could be coming down the road versus not pushing them too hard over the course of 82. I also think Karis LeVert and Jared Allen will be crucial in maybe translating Atkinson knees, if you want to call that Kenny's teachings. I still think a lot of the guys on this team look to Tristan just because there's a band. I wrote this at Media Days last year. When Tristan's on the court, the banner that's hanging above everyone's head, he has his handprints all over it. And he was a part of something that a lot of these guys, at this point, some of them grew up watching. So I just think that there's such a command that he takes, even though he's not going to play. If everything goes according to plan, he's not going to log significant minutes really ever if everyone's healthy. But it's just the idea that he's like a franchise institution. I like the idea of keeping a tentacle alive to that 2016 team. It used to be Kevin Love, now it's Tristan. And I like the idea of having a guy at the end of your bench who's just won a lot of playoff games. And, I don't know what Tristan Thompson can tell Donovan Mitchell about what it's like to carry the brunt of the load for that playoff game. But everyone else on that team, if you're talking about, 80% of a roster is role players, roles are different, but Tristan Thompson knows how guys are supposed to fit into a playoff roster.
And I also think this contract, because I believe it's going to be a veteran minimum for Tristan this coming season, is going to affect the payroll for this team, right? Because you look at the Isaac Okoro situation and whether or not he's going to sign the qualifying offer for $11.8 million or he's going to take a multi-year deal for a little bit less, right? Because it goes back to Ricky Rubio, which is crazy because you think about the veteran leadership of this team. So the Cavs stretched the $1.27 million that was owed to Ricky Rubio over the next 3 seasons. That allows for them to have a little bit more leniency when it comes to the luxury tax in the first apron. So the $424,672 of cap hit this season gives Cleveland more flexibility, right? But also with Tristan signing the veteran minimum, it only counts for $2 million towards the cap, and the NBA covers the difference. So this puts the Cavs around $15.7 million below the first apron and $8.6 million below the luxury tax. This may be why Isaac Okoro has waited so long to get a contract that could look like 3 years, around $25 to $27 million with a player option that would allow for him to either sign with the team again after playing some good years, or he could go somewhere else depending on what his value looks like. Or, like I said earlier, he could just take the qualifying offer because he feels like he's worth more around the league, which clearly has not been the case, but he might feel as though playing on the $11.8 million qualifying deal and then showing out and going to do his own thing for another team might be beneficial for him and his career financially and all those different things. I think it's just looking at how late we are in the summer and how these things have kind of fallen into line, Jimmy, and how this could affect the Isaac Okoro situation and what the Cavs decide to do with him. What do you think is the best choice for Isaac Okoro right now? To take the qualifying offer, or to try and sign for a more so like lengthy contracts when it comes to years, but a little bit less pay cut, a little bit more of a pay cut for what he might consider his value to be around the league?
I would answer that question with another question. If I'm Isaac Okoro, what are my priorities? If I want to maximize my career earnings, I'm probably taking that qualifying offer and betting on myself because, again, we talked about last week. If I can have one of those playoff runs where I shoot 36, 37, 38% from three for the right 2 weeks of the calendar, teams are leaving me open and I'm knocking them down, I can do better with my defensive reputation, with my ability, and that's will play out in the playoffs too. Because if I'm making those threes, I'm playing more minutes, I'm getting more TV exposure. We're probably winning more games if I'm making these threes and getting more time to defend some of the best opposing ball handlers. I can probably do better than that qualifying offer number of 11 million. Again, betting on myself, and if I'm Isaac Okoro, I'm assuming that bet is going to hit, right? The problem is like teams who have that kind of money to spend on a player like Isaac Okoro, and by that I mean even if he does stabilize as like an average playoff 3-point shooter, not someone who's going to change my universe, just a very useful role player with a long shelf life. Again, if he's making those shots, those are the kind of teams who aren't winning most of the time, right? If I want to win, there aren't many teams who are championship contenders or even a tier below that have a ton of money to spend. That's why we're here with the Cavs. The Cavs are decidedly a second, maybe even third tier championship contender in the league right now. I think they're a second tier Eastern Conference contender, probably a third tier championship contender at large. And they're playing a brand of hardball with Isaac Okoro right now because they're saying you kind of got to prove it to us. We're not willing to make, based on what you've shown us so far, we can't make a blind bet on, we can't put ourselves closer or at the second apron based on what you've shown us so far. And a lot of teams that are at or above the Cavs contention tier are in similar places, but that's good teams cost money. This is not news to anybody. So that's what I would say. If I'm trying to maximize my earning potential, I'm probably betting on myself taking that qualifying offer. If I want to continue winning, particularly winning with guys that I've already established good connections with, like I don't see anything wrong with Isaac Okoro securing a longer term payday that maybe undercuts the qualifying offer a little bit. Again, if I'm him in that way, it could go either way. It just depends on what he really wants.
And we're recording this on Monday. It'll probably air on Tuesday. And like it's just been an officially official kind of day, right? they brought Tristan Thompson back. They officially announced that JT Thor is joining the team. They officially announced that Imani Bates signed the qualifying offer, the two-way contract. So three different things. And we've been talking about the dominoes falling this summer for this team. Isaac Okoro, man, like this just needs to be the last domino to fall. And media day is in, if this airs tomorrow on Tuesday the 10th, 20 days away, right? And I know some people are like, well, Isaac's so athletic, he's able to do these kinds of things, and I don't know why they're not valuing him more, yada, 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 right? Yes and no, right? He is the best perimeter defender on this team. But as Jimmy mentioned, when it comes to 3-point shooting, he shot 39% in the regular season and then couldn't do anything in the playoffs, right? His playoff percentage was low. And when he was guarded by a center in the Boston Celtics series, he wasn't able to show his athleticism, right? If he's athletic, take the center to the hole because you got him on a quicker step, right? You're able to take that. You're in the corner, you have him, jab step, and then go to the basket, right? Because you have the quickness, the speed, the agility to outrun the person that was guarding you, especially old man Al Horford in that series, right? But I understand the value of Isaac Okoro. I understand what he brings to this team. I understand that, and we've talked about it. We've discussed it on this podcast, how difficult it would be for the Cavs if they ended up losing Isaac Okoro because they don't really have another true perimeter defender outside of Karis LeVert, who we don't know how long he's going to be with this team past the season, right? So I just think it's an interesting setup. And like we've talked about on this podcast, again, they are setting themselves up. The Cavs are setting themselves up to have some of these younger guys come in and take the role of some of the guys that they might not have due to the money in the CBA and all those different things. Because money talks, right? And as Jimmy said, the teams that win are willing to pay. But if you're not doing what you need to in the runs and the playoffs, that kind of lowers your value to the team that's trying to get further into the Eastern Conference playoffs, right? Eastern Conference Finals, NBA Finals. That's where they want to be. And I just think, like we've said a couple of times, this is the season where we decide, or the Cavs decide, what they're going to end up doing for years to come. So, Jimmy, to wrap this podcast up, out of the guys that are coming back on a new contract outside of Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley, who do you think is going to be most impactful? You got Isaac potentially, you got Tristan, you got JT Thor, you got Luke Travers, you got Imani Bates. And that's mostly it for the re-signings and stuff like that. I mean, you got the extension of Jared Allen, but I think that should be lumped in with the three of Donovan, Evan, and Jared because that's kind of an easy answer. So, what are you thinking of the quote-unquote young guys? Oh, and Jalen Tyson, because I think that would probably be my answer.
I mean, Jalen Tyson's the most interesting one. He's a guy that you spent a relatively high pick, especially given where the Cavs have been and are going. You know, they still owe Utah some draft capital for the Donovan trade. I don't know the exact details of the future pick situation right now. My brain is so football pilled right now. I apologize, but I know I think is there two more swaps and another pick that they owe him, something like that. And the Cavs are, again, I've written this, we've talked about this before. If things go as planned, 20 is probably about as high as they're going to pick over the next couple of seasons. So Jalen Tyson is an important piece for this team going forward. It is an interesting piece because if we're talking specifically in terms of replacing Isaac in the future, Jalen Tyson, most of his situation at Cal was I have the ball and I score. I have the ball and I create shots for myself and others. And I think even that's, forget the defense part of it. Jalen Tyson, I'll tell you this right now. He can work as hard as he wants. He's never going to be as good as a defensive player as Isaac Okoro. Let's get that out of the way. Even on offense, though, I think he has an interesting adjustment to make. Him and Imani Bates at different levels because Imani was such a heralded high school prospect who was told since he was 12 years old that he's going to be a star. But Jalen Tyson at Cal, not on a good Cal team, but they basically, his role was you do everything for us on offense. Like you have pretty much free reign to go and attack whenever you please. That's not going to be Jalen Tyson's role in the NBA. Like he looked really good in summer league, again, doing a lot of initiating and on-ball stuff, like better than I thought he would look, honestly, in that setting. But that's not who he's going to be in the NBA, assuming that we're projecting this with this Cavs core, which is all we could do right now. or even, anything really involving Donovan, he's going to be like a 3-and-D wing who's asked to catch and shoot threes, attack off of closeouts, move off the ball. Like, very seldom will Jalen Tyson have the ball in his hands at the end of a clock, end of a possession kind of a situation. Even if Darius gets traded for another 3-and-D type, like, Karis LeVert's above him in the pecking order when it comes to that sort of thing. So I think impactful, I don't know. It's probably still Isaac or Tristan if you want to talk intangibles. I've said this before. I don't think Jalen Tyson's going to have a huge role on this team this season, but I think that he's an interesting player to watch going forward just because of the role adjustment that he has to make from what he did in college, even what he did in summer league, to what the Cavs are projecting for him in the future. I think they don't have control over a first-round pick until 2030.
Right. They don't own a first-round pick until 2030. There you go. But right, like, that's just a situation that is going to make it hard to, like, create future representation on this team outside of what the Cavs have going for them right now, because these are the guys that they kind of built around, kind of sent and came back and said, okay, you got to have to do something because if it's not you in the future, who is it going to be? You got to let a second-round pick. I mean, obviously, Imani and Travers were both second-round picks, but, like, are you going to let somebody else come in and take your spot out of wherever? Like, so I think it's going to be interesting, Jimmy, and I think this is, as we said on multiple times throughout the podcast, going to be another year where there's a potential for somebody to show themselves, and there's a potential for guys to kind of jump onto the scene. We want to see evolutions from multiple players, right? Evan Mobley, Imani Bates, Luke Travers, Isaac Okoro. These are the guys that we need to see continue to grow and take their game to the next level for this Cavs team to get where they want to go. But with that being said, that'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Dog Podcast. But remember to become a Cavs Insider and interact with Chris and me by subscribing to Subtext. And you can even hit Jimmy with any of your draft or anything questions, and we can get back to you in real time right to your phone. To get this, sign up for a 14-day free trial or visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy. But we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me, Chris, and Jimmy. This isn't just our podcast. It's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through Subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.